Hi, I'm Dawn, and we're going to go over today over the SAROS series, the prenatal SAROS series. Right before your birth, there is an eclipse, and it has a specific eclipse family, and that family is called the SAROS series. Each of us has that specific series as kind of an indicator of how our lives will go forward. It introduces you, it seems. Today, Wanda is going to volunteer to share a lot of her experiences and see how the prenatal SAROS series is applicable in her experience. SAROS basically means cycle. It's a noun, an astronomical term. It's a period of 223 synodic months. The definition is here for anybody to read. I won't belabor the point. Many people have explained it previously. I just put this in so that everybody would understand what it is. Thank you so much, Linda. Using the first chart of the prenatal SAROS series. So when I first got Solar Fire, I was amazed to see, okay, each eclipse, the SAROS series is in there. When you look into your information, you can draw up all of the series, all of the eclipses within each series prior to your birth, and go back even to the first one, which is very telling. So extremely compelling information within these, and I don't want to, go too deeply into that. What I'd really like to do is just move to the next slide. This is Wanda's natal chart, and in it, the first thing we probably notice is Mars conjunct the Sun in Aries in the 8th house, which is a really clear signature. We see Pluto conjunct Uranus in the 1st on the ascendant. So these are pretty direct signatures to see. And we're going to see this reflected as well in her prenatal SAROS series. Next slide. So this is the first solar eclipse in Wanda's series, which is series 144. And this series started in 1763. Kind of a big time in our country. Prior to becoming the United States of America, I would say that the things that were going on were very much independent, something that shows in Wanda's chart a real independent initiative, a true spirit of going her way and making it happen. So within this chart, we see the eclipse at 21 Aries, and that was pretty clearly reflecting Wanda's Sun-Mars conjunction in Aries. We see the asteroid Wanda up it's the blue 13, right on the cusp of the 8th house. The asteroid Wanda shown at the cusp of the 8th house kind of reflects that her Sun, Mars, Aries conjunction in the 8th house in her own natal chart. It reflects these things. Wanda's middle name is Michelle, and that's at 3 Taurus. We don't really see it reflected so strongly here, but I just kind of wanted to introduce that way. And then I think Wanda will have a better handle on everything else that ties in and how she feels it ties in. So I think that at this point, Wanda, you could take it away. How do you feel about that?
Okay. I'll go ahead and continue on with the point that you just made there. The reason I had brought in and thought to look up the asteroid Michelle to see if there was an asteroid named Michelle was because I was told by my mother that Michelle was supposed to be my first name. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to see how that might have tied in. So that's the reason I, brought it in there. Um, the eclipse um, is actually my husband's north node. It's conjunct my husband's north node and my father's south node. And I thought that was just really interesting when Don, showed me this chart because that was kind of one of the things that my husband mentioned when we first met. He was like, I knew that we were going to get married. I knew that you were the one for me. So, and, with that Aries energy, ooh, I was like, oh, I don't know about this dude. So I thought, that was really, reflective there. Um, the Jupiter in Aquarius, that is conjunct my mother's south node in Aquarius. Um, so that seems quite significant to me. And let's see, the descendant is conjunct her sun. So I'm kind of wondering where that tie is there. Excuse me, because my natal excuse me, my natal moon is in the 12th. Let's see, the Saturn and Chiron in this chart is conjunct my father's Sun Mercury Uranus conjunction. It's also, especially the Sun, the Chiron is conjunct my mother's Mars. And all of that is my north node at 26 Taurus. So that seems very, very reflective as well. And then um, the MC, now as far as the Sabaean symbols, I'm still trying to learn about that, but it does seem rather interesting. It says a grand army of the Republic campfire, and I ended up actually going into the military. So
It's pretty poetic. Yeah, it ties in very clearly. That's why I made sure to include it. I think that also when you look at the SAROS series, when you're comparing, you're finding all of your relationships, your key, your important relationships reflected here in this chart. And if we're to look into, believe, or pursue belief of reincarnation, then your mother's son, I believe you said, at the descendant speaks volumes. Um,
yes,
Probably anybody would assume that you'd been together past lives as in partnership, and this time she's just your mom and she's ticking you off.
definitely.
Yeah, but that's wonderful. So we can see here that not only are you reflected pretty clearly, but your relationships, and this was in 1760, I'm sorry, 1736. So long ago. It really speaks to the fact that there's a plan out there, that you're not just a one-off or, all these different, you're not just a passing thought. Somebody special. Each one of us is somebody special, and we have a reason to be here. So if we could go to the next slide, we could look at that Sabian symbol and reflect on that a little bit. So the keynote of that is the will to reaffirm the value of the struggle upon which civilization and group achievements are founded. And that has a different, it goes a little further. So the campfire one, this one says retired Army veterans gather to reawaken old memories. So the gist of it is still there, but this goes a little deeper, as Dane Rudyard would have gone a little deeper. And reflecting more on what they're actually doing around the campfire. and what this symbol really means. So the men have come together, they're army men, and they're linked by actions and a type of consciousness that has roots in a common past. And for you, I think that ties in. It really felt like that was your path. That was, to get with people who think the way you do and have consciousness at the same level that you do. So you pursued that through the army, but you also pursue that through your astrology, and that's why you're here. So if we could,
I just wanted to
um,
add another quick little thing too. My husband is also military.
right, yeah, joining with him. So if you wanted to share more about how you feel this impacts on that.
Um, like I said, it just kind of dawned on me right now. As I mentioned, I don't know if it's in this past slide or a coming slide, with his Chiron being in Sagittarius. And like I said, he was also in the ex-military. So it makes me wonder, maybe we were comrades,
Right.
in a military in the past, coming back reunited again.
Mhm. That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, if you didn't have any more to think about this, we could go to the next slide. So this is for you, Wanda. Just let us know about the things that were going on or that are tying in from, this is the prenatal eclipse right before your birth. That's shown right here at the uh, sun at Ceros 144 right there, and the prenatal eclipse. Why is this? Something's wrong. And I apologize, but something's wrong with what we've got there. So disregard the rectangle over there, but we know that this 65 was supposed to be the December 8, 65, this chart here was.
Yeah, that's the prenatal, right before I was born.
So it's not vastly different from your birth chart, as it wouldn't be,
Right,
because
right.
it's so close. But
But it
tying
is
in.
interesting that I see is on my Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of my fourth house, and it's also conjunct the Jupiter in this chart, and the IC is conjunct my mother's Saturn. So it definitely ties in.
And so interesting that your natal Jupiter conjunct the IC in this chart rules the midheaven. Um,
Yes,
Super cool, if you ask me, because it tells me that, you know, there is the plan for you to be pursuing things like astrology through the Sagittarian midheaven, and and you do it from home. You're pursuing your higher learning and greater knowledge that way.
definitely.
Yeah. I see that the rectangle that I have here, I copied the wrong one, but it was still the 144. So if we could go to the next slide and forget about that embarrassing little glitch. So this one is 1970, and you're about 5 years old, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yep, 5 or 6. Probably started kindergarten somewhere. I think it was a preschool. It wasn't tied to the school, the public school system. This was I guess you would say like a private preschool because it was right across the street from the place where I lived. So I do remember it. I don't remember a whole lot as far as you know that particular time. I do know I was quite glad to go to preschool, because it meant being out of the house, getting out of out of the house. So yeah, there was a lot of tension. During the 1970s. You had, oh gosh, so much that was going on in the world. That much I do remember. There was tensions in the home at the time. My father had changed careers. Now, I only remember him in the career as a painter, but I was told that he was a former postman. He used to work for the United States Postal Service. So that could have been, part of the tensions because you were going from what at that time would be considered a steady job to something that's not very steady.
Mhm. Even more seasonal sometimes, given being
Yes,
up north,
definitely
right? You were in
was.
Illinois at that point?
Yes, yes, and it definitely was because of um, because they did it was commercial painting,
Mhm.
so work would definitely slow down in the wintertime. So yeah.
So he's changing careers. There's a lot of tension at home. Perhaps worry about finances, your
Hmm.
mother adding stress possibly.
Hmm.
I mean, the Neptune on the midheaven there reflecting, sort of a dissolving of the social place in the world, and that causing arguments with that Mars being right there seems to tie in. And the eclipse being on your ascendant, just upheaval in your place in the world, I would say.
Yes, and then Neptune, I would think that ties in as well, since Neptune in my natal chart is conjunct my South Node, which falls in the third house. So there's that Gemini archetype being reflected. And then, of course, the moon is in the 12th. So there's the Neptune
Okay.
Pisces archetype.
Yeah. So with this, you're seeing how that ties in. You're seeing how that affects through, and the with your SAROS series 144, you have these eclipses hitting. They're not total eclipses. They're coming together like every 5 years or so, and then the norm with the 18-year eclipses being that cycle as well on the total eclipses. So you're having them frequently hitting in your in your series at this point and then moving through your life. Some people, when we get to mine, you'll have your Saros series hitting every 18 years and that's it through your lifetime. But then somebody later down the road will have in the same Saros series, we'll have many eclipses hitting like Wanda's are every 5 years and then again on the 18s. So if you would tell us what you think about this in 1983, what was happening for you then?
Let's see, 83 was, I guess you say, the start of the long freedom, uh, get the heck out of Dodge period that I'm still, of course, currently in. 83 was when I graduated high school in June. Um, I started work, found my first job where outside of the home. The job that I was working prior to that, I was cleaning for my upstairs neighbor. So finally found that job in December. And I remember that little antidote that I put in there about, when I got my first check, because my father had given me, some instruction, had showed me, even his pay stubs. And at that time, they were still describing everything. I think it's OSADA, it was separated out. It was before they combined everything into FICA. So when I get my check, I see this FICA on there, and I'm like, who the hell is FICA, and why are they taking money out of my check? so,
Right.
and I always remember that, because like I said, that was part of that getting kicked out of the nest, and moving on,
And
which I
probably
think is
the,
a
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. which I think is reflected in the moon, my moon Venus skip steps. I think that's definitely part of that lesson. So
But then also being grateful to do it, being so glad that you could kind of escape.
yes, yes, yes. Even though I was still living at home, but yes. And let's see, the other probably big thing that I would think that would be tied to the eclipse is that I decided to go into the National Guard because of um, employment was kind of hard for high school graduates, because if you didn't have experience, they didn't want to hire you, and and during that time, the economy was still pretty rough. The recession of the 80s. So I decided to, okay, well, let me try, going into the National Guard. And right before uh, I was to leave that job and go to basic training, uh, probably one of the days that I will never, ever, ever, ever forget in my entire life, our store was robbed at 10 o'clock in the morning, Christmas Eve. Found myself looking down the barrel of a sawed-off shotgun. So we'll never, ever, ever forget that one. Yeah.
But you handled it beautifully.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little embarrassing, but
And you're here to tell us all about it, so that's the main part.
yes, exactly. It did not go wrong. So yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really reflected in the Mars opposition in this chart, and the job itself, with the moon on Jupiter, very helpful that way, and a Jupiter opposition as well. So I think this is pretty well reflected
Yes,
there.
definitely.
Do you see anything else about this chart that you wanted to speak to?
Uh, I noticed a lot that the Aquarius part is highlighted, and I'm wondering too. I think that's kind of reflected in my actual father himself, even though he didn't have any planets in Aquarius, but he has Sun conjunct Uranus, as I mentioned earlier. So I think that
Mhm.
that Aquarian archetype is reflected a lot in these charts, and definitely reflected in that Venus and Aquarius square nodes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, if you didn't have anything else to say about this chart or remembering anything that tied in, um, yeah, we can go to the next one.
Yeah, we can go to the next one.
Thank you. So this is 88, just 5 years later, and you're looking at some very key connections here.
Well, I am actually in the regular army at this time, so that is definitely reflected in the Mars. Um, and I had decided to, well, actually, I didn't decide. My first husband kind of decided for me that we were going to buy a house. Was not really ready to do that. The particular house that he wanted, I thought was kind of out of our budget. But I decided to go ahead and, you know, do that anyway. And then in February, went to a leadership training in while I was in the military, which of course led to a lateral promotion that very next year. Uh, so I think that's reflected again in that Mars, and definitely the Jupiter
Right.
conjunct the MC, and also I think the Sun, the eclipse falling in the first house, because there's that Mars archetype reflected there. And around March, and it may have been toward the end of February, I couldn't remember exactly when, I decided to adopt a cat. And I definitely had to put that in there because, and I know for some folks, that might seem a little strange what I'm about to say, but I really do feel like that was my soulmate cat. The person that I got her from was getting ready to go overseas at that time. Now I was working in the States, in Texas, and they were getting ready to leave, so they couldn't, of course, take the cat with them. And the cat was an outdoor cat, kind of a stray that they were, sort of feeding. And I was a bit nervous, when I decided to get her because, since she was used to being outdoors. But on the ride home, all I did was just kind of keep my hand over her, her back. She was sitting in my lap, and she was a bit nervous at first, but she calmed down. And then when we got home, she kind of checked out the house, and I'm thinking, that she was going to have a hard time, since she's used to being outdoors. But she just was like, "Oh, cool, I'm at home." And I never had any issues out of her at all. And it's funny because her name was Trouble. That's what they named her. And I was going to change it, but she I did, I guess I didn't want to confuse her.
Mhm.
So I left her name as Trouble. And the thing is, she was never any trouble at all.
So
And
good.
she would, if she knew when I was down, she would just like, she would try to comfort me. She would, actually hop in my lap and put her paws around my neck,
Oh,
so, and she got me through a lot of, because I have had difficulties with my first husband, and she got me through. It was like she understood me. We would have conversations. If you were standing outside of my home, you would think I, was crazy, because if she would just meow back like, yeah, meow meow, like I would say something, she meow meow, like she really understood what I was saying. So that's why I called her my soulmate cat.
yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
And then after a few months later, we had to go on a major military exercise where we were out of the country from about August to November.
Okay. That's a long.
And when we got home, when we got home, my cat was like, she kind of hissed at me at first, and I guess she was saying, "Where in the hell have you been? You've been gone from me all of this time."
How dare you?
Yes, how dare you? So
Yeah,
yes, 88 was definitely a pivotal year for me. And which I think is reflected again in the eclipse because the Virgo archetype is always associated with small animals.
that's true too. And there it is, with, like you said, a very pivotal year right on your Pluto Uranus conjunction in the first. It's pretty
Hmm.
huge. So, and with the South Node
So,
bracketing. So, like you
right.
said,
So maybe she was coming to me from a past life
yeah.
because she kind of acted like she was human, you know.
Yeah, if she's talking back to you.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Let's go to the next and see what happens next.
Okay.
2001.
Right. This was another very pivotal year. I had been promoted to a new position within the company, but I had already been working there for in that particular position for about a year. But at this time, my boss had decided to expand his territory, which greatly increased my job duties.
So you're not in
And
the Army now?
yes, I am out. I was got out in 1993 or 94, excuse me. So
Okay.
yes, I have moved, purchased a house in 2000, the house that I'm currently in right now. Um, and like I said, at my particular job decided to expand its territory out of town. So that increased my job duties, which in turn kind of increased my sort of started to increase my dissatisfaction and my restlessness within the job, which I think is reflected in that Uranus transit through the sixth house because it reflects the natal. Uranus, which is in Virgo,
Mhm.
in the first house. So in April 2001, I was on vacation, and couldn't really afford to go anywhere. That's why I call it a staycation. I think that's what the term that they were using back in that day, when you're on vacation, but you're taking it at home. And I was playing around with a debt calculator within the Quicken software. And that's when I found the snowball, where I could actually pay off all of my debt using the same money that I was using, currently, by following that plan. So I thought about it, because like I said, I was getting tired of the way things were going, as far as employment and things like that. So I said, okay, I'm going to follow this thing, because it said I could get out of debt in, I think it was 8 years from that point. So I was like, cool, that sounds good to me. So in July is when I actually put the plan in motion, put that snowball in motion.
Good for you. And look at that, the eclipse itself. I mean, uh, speaking right to that second house.
Yes,
So beautiful. So you were able to pay off your home and clear yourself of anything that, paying out. So you were able to really alter life entirely so that you didn't have to really work if you didn't want to.
yes,
Beautiful.
that was the goal.
Let's check that next slide, see what we've got there.
Yeah, this is the September 2006, and that's when the plan was actually completed. I paid off my mortgage, which was the very last debt within the debt snowball. I did that in June of 2006.
Beautiful. So that's huge. You completed all of that. You were able to just transform life all the way. It took a few years, but it's not like it was forever. 5 years is
Right.
certainly doable by any adult. And nose to the grindstone, and you made it happen. Pluto
Yes.
opposing your Jupiter in balance with, I would say, in the
Hmm.
fourth house, the Jupiter at the 10th. That really makes sense.
Yes, and it was almost like that. Um, the compulsion, because I always said that before I've started really and found out about astrology. I felt compelled to do it.
Oh, yeah.
It was that compulsion, and it was like every time when I kind of say, well, maybe not, it was like I kept feeling this force, like, no, you will do it. So I just had to go with it, and I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it also prompted other lifestyle changes as well that I noted here in the slide. I decided um, to stop chemically altering my hair, putting permanent or any of that type of thing in my hair, and to wear it in its natural state, which of course led to better eating, um, and just all of that.
Right. Everything just comes together where you really start expressing the value that you have for yourself, the
Yes,
correct value for yourself. You see it and you start expressing it, and you have the drive to express it.
yes,
So I think that's wonderful. All right. So after this, we have the next one, and that's um, coming up in 2024. And that's kind of a big deal. You got a lot going on there. Uranus on the North Node in Taurus. In the ninth house, that's telling me that you're seriously pursuing that astrology and making things happen with it. Jupiter on Jupiter, it's your return there. Always a good time. Well, I mean, not always, but for me it is.
yeah,
Yeah. And this one, this eclipse looks to be reflecting one that happened that we saw a couple of slides ago. Maybe I'm off base here, but anyway, the preponderance and the Libra in the second really shows your, opposing your own sun, but I would actually not say opposing, I would say balancing your own sun and
Hmm.
Mars conjunction. And it seems to be, an important thing for you, expressing that and doing well through it. Did you want to comment on this? Do you see something that sticks out for you?
That Yeah, you pretty much hit it there. The only other thing I was thinking, kind of thinking as well, since it is the Libra, the Venus archetype, I'm thinking too, and with Uranus actually being on the North Node, I'm thinking another furthering of and maybe even a resolution of the Venus skip step, since it
Mhm.
is in Aquarius.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking that that is your valuing of yourself, which is why I'm going back to that, really uh, recognizing what you have to offer everyone, the world.
Hmm.
You know, you have a, one killer independent spirit. You have, you set a fine example for people in that. I mean, just take that one little bit of uh, uh, debt elimination. Beautiful, beautiful example. So, so you shine for others as a beacon, and I think that speaks to your chart as a whole, anyway. Um, so with this in 2024, it seems to me with the Uranus on the North Node, you do find your own balance in your value of self, and you have um, pursuing your astrology and offering that out and doing well with it with the Jupiter on your own Jupiter in the 10th. So expanding your comfort as well, probably.
That's definitely a work in progress, but I've got quite a few years to go, because that's even close to the Saturn return as well. So yeah.
Yeah. You see, the asteroid Wanda at 11 Gemini is in trine to the eclipse, is sextile your personal sun. So these things make sense for me that this would work this way. So let's
Yeah,
look at
and
the
then
next.
yeah.
Oh, okay. This is our transition slide, and I didn't mean to. So I wanted to see, did you have any other thoughts on how this is showing you your path or anything?
I think it pretty much really hit it, because I really see it, like I said, kind of reflected in just the different archetypes. Even in the very first one, the 1736 one, I could kind of see some other, uh, other reflections of in the natal chart. So yeah, it's amazing.
Pretty huge. I use it for everybody, and most particularly, I I mean, I use it for everybody that I read for, but I always make sure to investigate that thoroughly when we're looking at synastry, partnership charts, relationship charts. These are huge. You can almost always see an important partner in there. If somebody comes to me and says, "Should I marry him?" you know, first I tell them I don't have that kind of answer, but but I would probably say, we're going to look for him in your chart and in all the charts that support your chart. And this would be one of them where we would seriously search. So it's very cool that we see your husband's reflected there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing so much, Wanda, and for digging in so deeply for us, because you really gave us a lot to show how these charts are really tying in and how we can use them. I'm going to
Thank
go into
you.
mine real quick, just briefly. Mine is the SAROS Series 155. It actually began in 1928. That being prior to the Great Depression and everything, it really speaks to things like my own personal story. At 6 months old, uh, I was kind of wasting away. I was getting real skinny. My mom was already pregnant with my sister, and so I had to stop breastfeeding because she didn't have enough. And so that became, uh, I went to formula. So that became kind of a thing, here, this chart, uh, being in June 28, speaking right before the Great Depression, is kind of reflected through my life. When I was 12, again, I moved from uh, Wisconsin to California, and they did that when I was visiting relatives elsewhere. So my sister and my brother and my mom packed up, but everything of mine was pretty much left behind. We did have to leave behind so much, but I lost everything that was important to me. So again, we're going through periods of doing without, and I think that the SAROS series reflects that kind of thing. We can look at history when we're tying in our the first solar eclipse of our own personal prenatal SAROS series. So when we look at this chart right here, pretty key, because the eclipse at 26 Gemini, that's my north node. And then the D17 over there is the asteroid Dawn, and that's my personal Neptune. This chart layout is actually set up like my natal chart with the midheaven in Leo, and my relocated chart at that at the point I was like 14, I moved to Texas, and that was my ascendant when I was in Texas. So, and um, daylight savings time was kind of a cluster at that point as well. So that was my ascendant without daylight savings time. And then this is a kite formation. This chart is laid out in a kite, and so is my natal chart laid out in a kite. And so let's look at the next slide and see. We'll start closing it up.
Dawn, Wendy has a question
This,
for you. Wendy?
great. Hi, Wendy.
Okay, it looks like she's her mic isn't working. So Wendy's asking, how does one know which SAROS series they are in?
So you would look at the eclipse prior to your birth, and you would be able to look that up just basically by searching eclipses. In Solar Fire, it is specific to going to the options which are in reports under tabulations of eclipse phases. So you'd be looking there. Those were those little rectangular boxes that I put in to Wanda's, and then as we move forward and through the charts on mine, I'll have one there as well, which will show that. But there are other ways, like you can go to the NASA website and search out the SAROS series of the eclipse prior to your birth, and it will list it there as well. I just don't use it because I used to have a really beautiful link that led right to it, and now I can't find it. So I just use Solar Fire. Astro might even have it, not sure, because I don't use that. Astro.com might have it. So this is just the Sabian symbol for the ascendant of the eclipse, and we can move forward to the next slide. And the Sabian symbol for the midheaven, which really speaks to my whole focus all my life, staring at the sky and learning from it and projecting onto it and trying to balance both of those and looking at shadow and looking at the gifts. And seeing the cycles as well. So we can move to the next slide. And this is the first SAROS series and my own chart combined, and we can see how it ties in everywhere. My own personal story doesn't really need to be told here since we're running out of time, but you can just see how it ties in. the north node on the asteroid, my natal asteroid Dawn, the eclipse on my north node, midheaven on my Mars, and Uranus in the fifth being my total joy, in balance with my sun. And then the eclipse asteroid Dawn on my Neptune. And we can look at the next slide. So it looks like Wendy found her prenatal eclipse, and that's beautiful. On this one, this is 64 right before my birth. I don't think we need to speak to this one too much, except to say that this rectangular box here shows the eclipses prior to and just following my birth. And each of these degrees is important in my own natal chart with, on the vertex, the moon, my name asteroid, and my north node all reflected in here, which is very cool. I know there's something with 3 Capricorn, but I don't know what. This is 1982. I graduated from high school at that point. I became pregnant at that point. My father left the family at that point. This is a huge, huge transition period. I had lots going on. Chiron on Jupiter, Mercury on my moon, and everything in that 12th house. Yep. So that was a tough time, but it was a big deal. And so let's move to the next slide. In 2000, another really big deal. I mean, huge transition period. I had just passed through the very worst times in my life and realized that, gosh, you know what? I can take it. And I'm strong enough to come through it. And look at that eclipse right on my Mars. Drive, determination, nothing's going to hold me back. Really expressing that, loving the studies of the astrology, just burying myself in a study of every sort, but astrology being my primary, and just pulling myself up by my bootstraps and really moving along. So it was beautiful. And it's all shown right there. So we can advance to the next one. The next one's next year. The next chart is in 2018, and I've been looking at it forever, but we can see right there, it's so huge. The eclipse is on my midheaven. We've got the ascendant. Now you want to run the ascendant of the eclipses for your local birthplace. You can use your relocated place, but always start with the birthplace because you started with the birthplace. And you're going to see these, these angles are all going to line up, as in this case, the ascendant for the Jupiter. The Jupiter is on my ascendant in that instance, and the ascendant right there of the eclipse lining up on my Mars. You'll see some very tight configurations based on the eclipse angles tying to your natal chart that would be missed if you don't run the right location. So I know that this is going to be huge changing, and basically I am ready, prepared, and set to take advantage of every little bit of it. So we could move forward to the next chart. 2036, again, pivotal. It's huge. There's too much. I'm not really one to tell the future, but I am one to look at it and try to work with the energies. So you can see, anybody can see by the highlighted items how key these things are. The node on the midheaven, the node of the eclipse on the midheaven, Saturn on my Venus, and the midheaven of the chart on my Venus. It's just huge. Pluto in the on the IC in the 4th house there with the south node. There's a lot going on, and we can look at the last chart And that's where I assume I'll be 90 years old. I think that Jupiter as an opposition is a good time to check out. A lot of people will say that Jupiter returns will do that as well, but this looks like a good timing to set that up. So eclipse on the Uranus seems to support that as well. So I think I've been able to show that the SAROS series really, really shows a path for your life, and you can, choose which way to go. We all have choice, but um, it really shows you the energies that you have to work with. Well, just as all eclipses will, but these are personal. These are much more tying in. You'll get an eclipse on your sun here and there. You'll get an eclipse, but these read the story of you as you progress. And I think that's cool beans. That's why I wanted to show it to you all. So thanks for joining us. My Sabian symbols come from Dane Rudyard at mindfire.ca. I believe that means Canada. And I want to thank Linda for putting together such a beautiful presentation. Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. And I want to thank Wanda for all your in-depth searching, going back through the history of everything and digging it all out. That was wonderful. And thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you
Does
so
anybody
much.
have questions?
Yeah. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Dawn. Yes, I would like to know, when you interpret the prenatal eclipse, what will be the difference between that eclipse and all of the one that you have seen? Like you were talking about the origin of the SAROS series, and you went back to an old time. And I would like to know what will be the difference between that one and the original one.
So the difference would be kind of like the original of the SAROS series. Oh, okay, so let's start at the beginning. The SAROS series is considered to be somewhat of your soul group. A lot of people have said that. I'm going to go with that just to start. So the first of the SAROS series would kind of be the birth of your soul group. This is your soul group's plan, so to speak. But it's also more personal in that first eclipse of that SAROS series is going to speak to you as well. You're going to find yourself in that soul group. You're going to see that by comparing that to your natal chart. And then the eclipse within that SAROS series right prior to your birth, which defines which SAROS series you're born into, that will have a lot of synchronicity with your natal chart, just because it's before your birth and it's close in time to your birth. Now, I've read some say that that's kind of the eclipse prior to your birth is kind of like when God has the idea of you. I think it's much further back, which is why I'm presenting the first eclipse of the SAROS series into which you're born. Does that answer your question, Marie? I'm hoping. I hope I was able to answer that clearly. I hope that cleared it up. Does anybody else have questions or comments?
I think Wendy has a question. Let me see. She's typing it in, so just give us a second, Dawn.
No rush by me.
Does the eclipse cycle I think, Wendy, if you speak, we should be able to hear you. We can hear you typing. She says, my cycle is 127. There have only been 4 cycles of it since. And so what is your question? Well, do you have a comment on that, Dawn?
Sure. That's kind of what I was saying when I was presenting Wanda. Wanda had so many eclipses hitting. She had them every 5 years and her 18 years. Mine are every 18 years. Because mine is in, my SAROS series is early, young, I guess you would call it, started in 1928. But Wanda's has been around for a while, 1763. That's what, 200 more years there, or 36, 1736. 200 more years she's had to be going through the cycles. So if you were to look at the SAROS series itself and plot every eclipse, you'd be able to see that it starts out with partial eclipses and then it graduates into, I believe, apulse, annular or apulse, I forget, I'm sorry. Those types of eclipses, and then you'll start to have totals, and then the lunars will come in. So you'll see, like in mine, I didn't have lunar eclipses in my SAROS series yet because it's so early.
Okay, Wendy says, oh, wow, amazing. So thank you so much, Dawn. And we really must wind down now. So unmuting everybody.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn.
Good work,
Thanks,
you two.
Wanda. Beautiful.
Thank you.
See y'all.